I think our strongest power is our humans, our people, our human resources.
What happens when a continent that has lived for decades in the shadow of blackouts suddenly takes control of its own light? That is the defining question of Africa in 2025. Electricity here has always been more than wires and switches. It has been the dividing line between mere survival and the possibility of prosperity. And this year, that line is being redrawn. Take Ethiopia, for example. When the massive turbines of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam finally began spinning, it was not just a local victory. It was a thunderous statement that Africans would no longer wait for outsiders to decide when their factories could hum or when their villages could glow. With more than 5,000 megawatts of capacity, the dam alone generates more power than entire regions of the continent currently consume. For Ethiopia, it means industry without compromise. For the Horn of Africa, it means new leverage in a neighborhood long dominated by dependency. In Mozambique, the story is just as bold. The $6 billion Mfanda and Kua project on the Zambezi River is more than just concrete poured into a riverbed. It is a pipeline of hope, promising thousands of jobs during construction, reliable electricity for millions, and a steady export commodity for a nation too often trapped in cycles of aid and crisis. Southern Africa has long known the frustration of rolling blackouts. Now, it dreams instead of rolling prosperity. These projects are not isolated. They are part of a larger continental mission, one that Africans themselves have named Mission 300. Its goal is breathtaking: to connect 300 million Africans to reliable power within just 6 years. Imagine what that means: millions of homes swapping smoky kerosene lamps for clean bulbs, hospitals running life-saving equipment without interruption, farmers refrigerating produce instead of watching it rot. And it is not just about megadams. In Uganda's West Nile, the Atuka solar power station is rising with its 24 megawatts of clean energy. In North Africa, solar exports are breaking records. In South Africa, new low-carbon infrastructure financing is preparing the grid for a greener energy mix. Everywhere you look, the narrative is shifting. Africa is no longer begging for scraps of electricity. It is building its own future, kilowatt by kilowatt. But this energy revolution is not only about technology or money, it is about dignity. For decades, energy poverty was treated as a fact of life in Africa, something the world acknowledged but never solved. Children studied under dim streetlights, mothers cooked over smoky fires, and businesses stumbled under unreliable grids. But 2025 marks the year when those images began to fade into history. Power here is not just electricity, it is empowerment. It is the right to decide one's own destiny. Yet power is never an end in itself. When the lights come on, the real question emerges: what do people do under that light? For children, it means homework done in peace. For parents, it means safer nights and longer working hours. For entrepreneurs, it means welding sparks lighting up new businesses. Power unlocks potential, but potential must be nurtured to grow. And that is where Africa's second revolution of 2025 begins, not in turbines or solar fields, but in classrooms and kitchens. This year, a bold decision reshaped the future of millions, to feed both minds and bodies. Across the continent, 87 million African children are now receiving school meals, a figure unimaginable just a few years ago. But behind those numbers are real transformations. A child who once sat in class distracted by hunger can now focus, energized and eager to learn. Attendance has soared in countries like Sierra Leone and Benin, where classrooms once emptied by midday as children left to scavenge food. Now they stay, they learn, they dream. And this is not charity, it is strategy. Governments are not relying on foreign grain ships. Instead, they are buying food directly from their own farmers. In Sierra Leone, maize growers now supply schools. In Benin, rice farmers enjoy steady contracts with their government. This shift has created a circular economy. Farmers gain income, schools gain reliable food, and children eat meals that reflect their own culture. In one move, hunger is fought, farmers are empowered, and local economies are strengthened. Feeding the body is only half the picture. 2025 has also revealed Africa's determination to feed the mind. Across the continent, new education technologies are spreading. In rural Malawi, AI-powered tools guide farmers on drought-resistant seeds, giving real-time advice in local languages. In Kenya, math apps built in Swahili help children who once struggled with English-based lessons. In Nigeria, digital platforms create interactive classrooms that don't stop when teachers leave for the day. These are not imported solutions. They are African innovations, designed for African realities. And they thrive because of the groundwork laid by expanded internet access, and critically, the new wave of electricity supply. Without power, a tablet is just a piece of plastic. With it, it becomes a window to the world. Nutrition and education now reinforce each other. A well-fed child learns better. A better educated child breaks cycles of poverty. And parents, once hesitant to send children to school when food was uncertain, now see education as an immediate benefit, not just a distant promise. This subtle shift in perception may be one of the most powerful legacies of 2025. Schools now serve as both centers of learning and anchors of community well-being. Yet progress raises another challenge. A child may be fed and educated, but how can that potential flourish if the roads are broken and the rails stop short? That is why Africa's story in 2025 also leads to infrastructure, the bridges, highways, and railways that turn individual progress into continental transformation. This shift begins with finance, but not the usual foreign loans. A report this year revealed Africa holds more than $1.1 trillion in domestic capital locked in pension funds, insurance reserves, and sovereign wealth pools. For decades, this money sat abroad while Africa borrowed from outsiders. In 2025, the tide is turning. African states are now investing African money into African projects. The symbolism is immense, Africans funding their own future. The Tanzania-Burundi standard gauge railway is one striking example. Stretching from Uvinza in western Tanzania to Gitega, Burundi's capital, it promises to slash transport costs and open trade routes for one of Africa's landlocked nations. For Burundi, whose minerals often sat stranded, this railway is liberation on steel tracks. For Tanzania, it is proof that regional integration can be built mile by mile. South Africa too has taken decisive steps. With billions in new financing, it is upgrading ports, modernizing transport, and laying the foundation for a greener economy. And across Uganda, West Africa, and beyond, smaller but equally vital projects are reshaping communities. From solar stations tied to new grids to fiber optic cables that weave a digital backbone as important as asphalt and steel. What is different now is purpose. Colonial railways were built to extract resources. Many post-independence projects became debt traps. But 2025 feels different. These projects are practical, rooted in trade corridors, industries, and integration plans like the African Continental Free Trade Area. They are not monuments. They are mobility. And Africa is no longer building in isolation. These highways and ports are regional arteries preparing the continent not just to trade with itself, but to connect confidently with the wider world. That global connection was on full display this year when Johannesburg hosted the G20 Summit, the first ever on African soil. For decades, Africa was treated as a backdrop at such gatherings, spoken of but rarely spoken to. But this year, leaders of the world's largest economies flew to Johannesburg not to announce aid packages, but to sit at a table set by Africa itself. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. A continent once framed as dependent is now recognized as indispensable. The timing could not have been better. With power surging, schools thriving, and railways opening trade corridors, Africa arrived at the G20 with achievements, not demands. The message was clear. The continent is not just asking for inclusion. It is bringing energy, markets, resources, and a collective vision for development. That assertiveness has echoed through culture and sport as well. Rwanda hosted the UCI Road Cycling World Championships for the first time. Egypt prepared to host the Africa Cup of Nations. Music, film, and fashion from Lagos, Nairobi, Johannesburg, and Dakar continue to take the world by storm. These are not just cultural exports, they are statements of identity. Proof that independence is measured not only in megawatts or rail miles, but in the power to tell one's own story. Still, independence is never without challenge. Powerful nations are reluctant to see Africa step out of dependency. Trade negotiations and investment deals often come with hidden strings. But 2025 has revealed a new confidence in Africa's tone. Leaders are rejecting lopsided contracts and walking away from deals that strip resources. They are building alternative partnerships with those who respect their terms. This shift may create friction, But it is also the clearest sign that Africa has learned from history. Yes, setbacks will come. Elections will be contested, economies will be pressured. But the momentum of 2025 feels irreversible. Power has been harnessed, children fed, infrastructure rising, and global recognition achieved. The challenge now is to make it last, to weave it into a permanent fabric of sovereignty that no external storm can unravel, because for the first time in generations, the continent holds the pen in its own hand, ready to write the next chapter of its destiny. So, the final question is not whether Africa will rise. That is already happening before our eyes. The question is how far Africa is prepared to go in defending the independence it is carving out. You believe Africa's rise in 2025 is unstoppable? Which matters most, power, food, or industry? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to see more stories about Black culture, history, and Africa's future, make sure you like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Because the revolution of Africa is no longer coming. It is already here.